thumbnail this time.
Mid-sentence.
Mid-sentence, though.
Nope.
Cheers, Chris.
Cheers.
Clink.
I'm pouring.
You're pouring. I will be patient.
Okay.
Oh, I don't normally have such a lovely little glass of wine here. I got befuddled. Oh, that's how it is when I pour it. I'm never good at doing a pour that has a manageable amount of foam. It's always like 75% foam.
I don't know what happened. I think I need to let it sit. Anyway, here I can.
We can still clink. We can still do a little cheers. Oh, juicy bullshit. Chris, what a sassy little beer. Tell me more.
Well, let's see. It's made in Groton.
Oh, okay.
That's right. And the what's it called? The Outer Light Brewing Company, Groton, Connecticut.
Very nice. There are so many breweries I still haven't been to yet. And I need to get out there and get to these places. I keep on discovering breweries I haven't heard of. I mean, there are breweries I've heard of I still haven't been to, but I've had a few Groton moments in the last year or so because so apartment prices are decent there, but it's so far away from so many of my places. I was just like, not gonna work.
Yeah. There's something rotten in Groton. But
well, I love Norwalk too much. I can't leave Norwalk right now. I just can't. Mom and Dad are in the chat. Hello.
Hi, Mom and Dad.
Hey, Mom and Dad. I see Penelope Rugby has popped in too. I see it on my phone though, not on. They haven't said hi yet. Hello, Penelope though. Anyhow, as folks are coming on in, Chris, didn't we have just a fabulous weekend?
Oh, yesterday was spectacular at the New York Poetry Festival out there on Governor's Island.
Yeah.
On the island, Pete Nelson is here.
Pete Nelson. Love it. Fantastic.
Doing good out there, Pete.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Pete. And we just had the most wonderful time. It was a beautiful day, and
unfortunately, today was not as nice.
Oh yeah, I know. Unfortunately,
but yesterday it was perfect, and we saw I don't know how many poets. You think like 1 million poets were there?
Oh, so many.
We took a ferry full of poets all over to Governor's Island, and the place was just crawling with them.
It was amazing. And Chris was saying that, listen, we need to write a piece. We need to write a poem about a ferry full of poets. That would be just an incredible piece, I think. Just a delightful one. A ferry full of poets. And then we had an island full of poets,
The island was kind of lopsided there for a while. Over here, and they were making noise. There was a lot of noise.
That's so funny.
Noisy.
Well, it was marvelous. They had several stages. Ooh, my earrings. We had several stages there. We got to see so many of our friends, special guests that we've had on, people that we've met in other live stream readings, Red or Green Books, who we've featured in several different readings. We even had all of their, like a whole cohort of their poets on back in January. We got to meet so many of them and more. It was wonderful. We got to see, let's drop some names, Chris. Who was the first person? We saw Elizabeth Strauss.
Yes, we did. We saw Generalissimo, Brian Franco.
Yes, Generalissimo, Gigi Marie. We got to see Marissa Prada herself.
Yeah. Nick,
Nick P, Nick Paleologos,
many others.
Jerry Johnson.
Jerry Johnson, and in person, you don't see these people in person. You have no idea how tall they are. You know,
No,
they look like, except from here, and
right.
it was so nice to see everybody.
It was awesome. It was awesome. Maria Lacella,
Maria,
Jerry Johnson. Who else? Who else? Who else?
uh,
Ron Mark, Trankler,
Art,
Thomas Thompson. I always mix up his last
Ron
name.
Thompson.
Thompson. From Bronx Art and Fun
Yeah,
Hub. And we got to see Mahogany Brown. It's amazing.
incredible.
Really incredible. Really incredible. Everybody should go next year and meet up with us there. We're maybe thinking of booking ourselves a reading time, performance time there. So should be really special. It was lovely. And thanks so much for hanging out with me all day, Chris. It was a blast.
It was fun. We
Love hanging out.
get to take the ferry and hang out on the island and like go take a peek at that little spa they got there.
You guys.
Katie's saving up her pennies so she can go sit in the spa pool
The
and look at the
spa
Manhattan
pool.
skyline.
Yes, that's right, Chris. If you see any spa pics on my social media, I'm living that dream. But I think I
Oh,
need to wait until next summer to make that happen. Yeah, like I said, my fun money is running down. But Chris, we need to give our official welcome. Oh, we're just chatting away over here.
Welcome.
All right, everybody, officially welcome to FUMFA 106. Can you believe it? We are so excited to welcome two special guest poets this evening, Sandy Carlson and Jack Powers, and they will be reading and sharing with you very, very soon. It's going to be a great time. But, before we get into that, Chris, can you tell us what are some readings and events we have coming up soon?
Okay, well this week we are going to have our in-person open mic.
Woo!
That's Friday, September 16th. That's just a few days away. So we won't be here next Sunday, but we will be in South Norwalk on Friday doing that, and we have great featured guests who include FUMFA folks like Michelle Lee and AJ O'Connell, plus we got some music from Karen Zimmer and poetry from Barb Jennis, also known as B. Fulton Jennis, right? Poet laureate of Ridgefield.
Whoop, whoop.
Tonight we have a poet laureate on as well, and then we're going to have other folks who are signing up to perform. So that's at 7:30 at Eco Evolution in South Norwalk. Look up, get the information on our Facebook page and what have you. And that's going to be fantastic.
It's going to be awesome.
2 weeks we're back here. We got Meredith Bergman and Mary Catherine Harper. And then that's on the 25th, and on October, God help us, we're not almost to October already. We got Matt Cedillo and Tango Ice and Martin. And then following week, we got our old friend Larry Bloom and Brad Davis. And then we're into the next open mic, live in-person open mic. So great stuff coming up. And we're
great stuff.
Cruising all the way through the fall. And people out there start thinking about Spooky Night, which is going to be on the 30th of October. We're going to have an open mic on here for your spooky stories.
Woo-hoo. It's going to be awesome. Please come out if you are local, even if you're not so local and you want to take a good old drive or a train ride, come on down on Friday night. Also sign up. We have advanced signups open. Reserve your spot, and also let us know that you're going to be there. We really want to see our community and our friends out there. And also let us know if you're interested in reading on the stream. Send us an email or fill out our form that was posted a while back. And we're really just excited about everything that we're getting to do right now. And thank you for enjoying it and being a part of it. But we need to get into our first reading of the evening. We are going to welcome Jack Powers. Welcome, Jack.
Hello. Thanks for inviting
Hello.
me. Hello out there, TV land.
Perfect.
When they say, "Okay, we're gonna hook up now with Apollo 23 out there in outer space," and then they say, "Hello."
Hello. Jack, how are you doing this evening?
I'm good. Thanks again for inviting me.
Oh, our pleasure. Our pleasure. We're excited to hear you read. I will share your bio with our audience. Jack Powers is the author of Everybody's Vaguely Familiar. What a cool title. His poems have appeared in the Southern Review, the Cortland Review, and elsewhere. He won the 2015 and 2012 Connecticut River Review Poetry Contests and was a finalist for the 2013 and 2014 Rattle Poetry Prizes. That's awesome. And you can visit his website at jackpowers13.com/poetry. Please, Jack, take it away.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to, I'm going to start out with some poems from Everybody's Vaguely Familiar. This is the opening poem called Bonehead. My mother signed notes in my high school lunch bag, "Love Bonehead," long after we could talk of love. She laughed at the sound of the word, the cartoon image, and love elevated Bonehead to a tender ache that reached across the gap from weary mother to leery teen. She hated lousy and meal, but to her, Bonehead sounded gentler than idiot, dope, moron, cretin. Although dope acquired a softness when my father, deep in his dementia, asked, after a long day of song and cake and tears from my 5-year-old, "Whose birthday is it?" And my mom, a skeleton herself after a year and a half of waking to find him dressed in 3 polo shirts on damp July nights, or hiding the markers so he'd stop writing names in the photos of the grandchildren, said, "It's Will's, you dope." And we all laughed at the exhausted appropriateness. Too tired for Bonehead, she took it up a notch, and we all appropriated the word to use when loved ones wore us down to the bone. So I want to thank you again for inviting me, and just if you haven't read Chris's novel Shriver, I just finished it. It's excellent. Want to thank Katie too. Got her poetry book out there. Is it coming out backwards? No, that's right. Okay, thank you. And the next poem I wanted to read is called Counting. Counting. Whitney Houston is dead, found in a hotel bathtub just before the Grammys, as if she just slid down, awake or asleep, and let the waters claim her. And the airwaves are full of The Preacher's Wife and The Bodyguard and I Will Always Love You, which I learned was written by Dolly Parton, a fact I can't quite wrap my ear around. And as Anne watches the funeral broadcast live from a Grand Baptist church in Newark, I wonder how such talent can lead to such misery, and if the two are related at all. I mark up some papers, read the baseball scores, give the caddis pill, and wonder if celebrity is the greatest drug of all. How else to explain reality show Whitney, dragging her plump preteen daughter into our living room as she and Bobby camp out pretending to have ordinary lives? And all the has-beens and almost weres on celebrity rehab trying to reclaim their lives or die famous. And think how season 4 ended with the mother of an overdosed rock star forgiving his drug-addicted rock star buddy who watched them die. She said, "You don't have to live a fantastic, incredible celebrity life. You can live a boring, predictable life. And you cannot believe how rich that is until you're in it." And though I don't believe I understand religion's pull to give certainty and dignity to ordinary life, I understand celebrities' lure to make a memorable life in this all publicity is good publicity world. And that night, when Anne orders the devil's roll, and I the mango tango and the Godzilla roll, and eat them with the chopsticks still attached because I'm too embarrassed to ask for a fork, I watch the 2-year-old at the next table eat her rice and mimic everything her 4-year-old brother does. And the baby in a high chair 2 tables down smiles and gurgles at the finely tweezed college girls across the aisle who flirt with him. And I wonder if this is it, the tang of the mango with the crunch of the spicy tuna, the wide cheekbone smile of the waitress whose name I can never remember, the hot tea, the soy sauce I dip my rolls in, the crowd in the restaurant that ignores us so we can eavesdrop and catch snippets of their lives in quick glances. In a dream last night, I sat across from a white-haired woman with pearls and startling blue eyes, talking about the magic of cities, how they were invented by the Puritans in New England. I know she's someone, but I don't know who. And though I know what she says isn't true, I'm infatuated with her certainty. Even after I wake, I can still see the textured red of lipstick on her cigarette, the smoke rising in a lazy curl, her elegant, veined hands dancing as she speaks. Who doesn't love a celebrity rising up with a fresh new story? Who doesn't shake their heads when they fall? Who doesn't sigh and settle back into the dull, safe waters of anonymity? I wonder if Whitney closed her eyes and slipped beneath the water, like a child counting to 100 while the other children hide, palms pressed to her face. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4. These poems, as I said, are from everybody's vaguely familiar. Golden Antelope Press, great press. Oops. I've got another. I'm going to read a few books from poems from that, and then I've got a new collection that is sitting at my publishers now. I'm hoping to hear good news from them. Next poem is called "He Couldn't Remember." He couldn't remember why he got up, why he'd come upstairs, tapped his pocket for a pipe he quit years before. No urge to pee, no wet pants, no growling stomach. He wandered around the bedroom, raised the accordion blinds on the narrow window, wondered if he'd just forgotten how bad his memory had always been. But then, it never mattered what he'd been looking for anyway. It's what he'd found. Like this paisley-moted shaft of afternoon light bending through the dusty panes, a yellow spotlight like the one the 30s painter, famous for lonely men in a night-lit diner. He'd seen it once in a high-ceiling museum while standing hand in hand with a black-haired, soft-faced beauty who might once have been his wife. I should have had more water beforehand so I wouldn't be thirsty now. So these poems are kind of a memoir in verse. And a lot of them are about, you saw a mom poem and a dad poem. We'll get here's a family vacation poem. Get my brother in on this. Family vacation, 1965. In Providence, they put Nanny between us to stop the punch wars I was losing to Donnie. Although I would never admit it until my bruised and battered biceps fell off my shoulder. Even then I wouldn't cry, wouldn't give Donnie the satisfaction of knowing he'd won. Wouldn't give my parents an excuse to move me into the way back where Ellen read, surrounded by luggage. Or between them in front, where Chrissy bobbed her head like some dashboard Virgin Mary, smiling like she never did anything wrong, which isn't true, since that's why she was sitting there in the first place. Now I felt sorry for Nanny on her first vacation to the Cape, trapped between bored 10-year-old me and more bored 13-year-old Donnie. We could only stare out the window for so long before the monotony drove us to team up and start watching her lips and saying what she said at the same time she said it, until she begged, "Please, boys, stop, it's not funny," as we begged along, until my father swung his arm over the seat and threatened, "Don't make me pull over," slapping blindly with his hand. As my mother pleaded, "Please, Don, watch the road," and the car swung back and forth in traffic like a dog straining against a leash. Then Dad slammed on his brakes and swerved into the line for the Cape exit, and we all panted in relief and excitement, as if returning from our wild selves. Glad to have survived again, until at the Bourne Bridge, cars backed up at the circle, their roofs piled high with coolers, bikes, and beach chairs. Donnie asked if I wanted to see who could hit the softest, and I reached across Granny and brushed his bicep. And he reached across and clocked me, knuckles twisting to reach the bone, and as I cried out, he smiled and said, "You win." So I'm a little concerned here. Sandy said there'll be may have a lot of senior citizens reading hers, so you may have to bleep out part of this.
No worries, Jack. Go for it.
Okay, thank you. This was actually in the middle of another poem that is the title poem. Everybody's vaguely familiar. I couldn't get it published, couldn't figure it out, and then when I took it out, they both got published. So it's called "Being a Dick." Once, when I was painting the Milligan's house, I walked into the kitchen with Dick Jr. to find Dick Sr. and a gray-haired man in overalls holding an old plumber's wrench. When the elder Dick said, "Have you met my son, Dick?" the handyman smiled and offered a hand. "Dick Swanson," he said. And I, figuring, when in Rome, offered my own hand. "Dick Powers," I said, "pleased to meet you." The Milligans laughed. Dick, the handyman, offered a firm handshake, and life went on. Except in the fall, I got a job at the middle school, and on my way to lunch was greeted by a smiling handyman Dick. He taught 8th grade science on the 2nd floor. Each day at noon, he'd smile and shout, "Hi, Dick," and I'd wave, "Hi, Dick." For 30 seconds every day, I was Dick. I wondered if I taught next door, would we hang out together? Would I start helping him out with handyman jobs on weekends? Would I leave teaching to form Dick and Dick, Handyman Solutions, or Two Dicks, Handymen? Let's face it, being Jack is easy, but being Dick, that's tough. You're crushed or grow stronger. Proud of all the Dicks who persevered, who exchanged hearty handshakes in a secret society like I glimpsed in that kitchen. 4 Dicks sharing a laugh. And then in keeping with the swearing, once we're, since we've crossed the line anyways, I'm bringing my own children into this. This poem is called "Holy Shitballs." The radio's off so the kids can sleep in back, their faces smush into my mother-in-law's shoulders, their breaths slow and muffled, the tires to thump on the road. Our high beams split the night and pull us home. Joan's probably nodding between them, repeating her prayers for harmony, as if she willed this happy, tired Thanksgiving night drive. Anne's head slides to rest on her window. Our breathing synchronizes to sighs and silence. When Zach shouts, "Holy shitballs!" Joan gasps. Anne sticks a sharp fingernail in my thigh in case I'd forgotten I had insisted Ace Ventura was fine for a 5-year-old. Ignoring her insistence that I listen to the ratings. I picture my 12-year-old self, red-faced, hands gesturing wildly, and my father shrugging, stuttering, "You're just not ready." And now Anne's found a website that counts the shits and fucks and breasts and butts. But I get it. He's 5. I know the sharp pain of parenthood without her fingernail reminder. I'm supposed to save him from moments like this, when the joy of holy shitballs wears off. In the silent aftermath, he begins to realize what he's done. Imagines his grandmother reciting prayers for him. But that holy shitballs was such joy. Some sounds light up the brain's pleasure zones, want to be felt in the mouth, heard in open air, echoing in your own little voice. Like the shit howdy I'd heard exclaimed in happy surprise by the pseudo cowboys I knew in Colorado. Or my friend Guy's fucking A shouts of frustration. How can you count and measure that? In the dark silence of the car, I feel relief. At least I didn't take Aaron, who sighs now peacefully, still innocent of the joys of swearing. As Joan prays for our souls or perhaps muffles her laughter, and Zach wonders how the echo of holy shitballs could turn so quickly to the "I never should have" regret that often follows great joy. The realization you can't go backwards. No one speaks. The tires keep their beat in the cold night. We each nurse our own thoughts in the warm car until, in the darkness, Aaron whispers, "Holy shitballs." Slow and careful, as if memorizing a prayer, and seems to fall back to sleep. So those are from the first book. Well, my only book. Everybody's vaguely familiar, and I thought since it's 9/11, should be some recognition of that. And I do not have any poems that would be appropriate. And this one popped up on my feed recently. I don't even know where it came from, but I just want to read this just to recognize the date. It's by Wisława Szymborska, and it's called Photograph, from September 11th. They jumped from the burning floors, 1, 2, a few more, higher, lower. The photograph halted them in life and now keeps them above the earth, toward the earth. Each is still complete, with a particular face and blood well hidden. There's enough time for hair to come loose, for keys and coins to fall from pockets. They're still within the air's reach, within the compass of places that have just now opened. I can do only 2 things for them: describe this flight and not add a last line. So the problem, of course, with reading is a poem by Wisława Szymborska is that I have to follow that. Her brilliance is always how she focuses on just one piece so clearly. And I love that turn in the end of All I Can Do. All right, so Awkward Shift. I have a new collection of poems, and I started writing them during right after I retired. And so the focus is on retirement. And well, the first one I think explains it. So first poem in the collection is called Last Act. I laugh with my doctor at his patient who said, "I want you to be my last doctor," imagining him checking that off his list of last barber, last mailman, last mechanic. A dark laugh that ended in a shared sigh at his audacity and ours. At 65, I've started thinking about my last dog, my last house. I figure I have 10 good years left before the marbles go. Time enough, if used well, for one last act, one new start, but no time to lollygag. My yoga teacher says, breathe, just be. My writing teacher says, cut lollygag. Instead, I look up synonyms and linger in the shilly-shally of now, the dawdle, crawl, the tarry, drag, and lag, the assonance of last act, of sound, slowing time, laughing at marbles and audacity, of planning a last anything. So I started out with the idea of writing short poems, and sonnets seemed like a good frame to start with. They're mostly kind of sonnets I wrote the back of. I'm realizing I'm running way over time here. So
no, you're good. You're super, super good. You have 7 more minutes.
7 more minutes. The problem is I have 12 more minutes of poems. So, but I can. I'm going to adjust right here. So this is the title poem of the book, called Still Love. And what I tried to do also is get away from my life and observe. A lot of the poems are other people's stories and couples that I've observed. Still Love. I was her rebellion. Ben drinks his beer, and she was my shot at normalcy. We lasted 10 years. He sighs, sips again. She got over rebelling, and I guess I couldn't be normal. His smile suggests the last part is a joke, or at least a funny truth. But his story, listing all the moves and arguments, leaves out those moments when it worked, or they believed it would, and laughed or made love. In the end, he recalls when she told her it's the end, he recalls when she told her therapist, don't listen to him, he's evil. Yet she got him to a doctor when he said, I just want to dive in the ocean and keep swimming. Wasn't that still love? And I'm trying to do this on the screen, but I just realized the one drawback. So here's another one, and this is where I just start messing around with the sonnet. I can't really follow directions. It's called Unruly Sonnet. I keep trying to corral Amy and Carl into 14 lines, but they break out alone and together. Amy visits us, her daughter, a wounded bird in her lap, says, Sex hurts. I've got books, flowers, Lizzie. I'm done with love, leaving the details of her drink demolish marriage unspoken. Then Carl appears, sandy-haired saint, scooping them both in his arms, luring Amy back into the open, humming softly to Lizzie. We all clap in bewildered delight. And just when I've steered them into stanzas, Amy comes north alone, slips me a photo of Carl in a black dress, wearing red lipstick and eyeshadow, says, she's Colleen now. It's weird to feel her boobs in my back when we spoon. Amy raises a glass to Carl, to Colleen. We drink. She posts photos of crocuses and Kerouac. The turn comes too soon. Amy died Christmas Eve in her sleep, Colleen writes. Lizzie and I are heartbroken. They drive north that summer with ashes. We balance on Amy's old dock, say goodbye to Mommy. Colleen whispers to Lizzie, who's curled into her chest, and they shovel cinder and bone in high arcs into the bay. And eventually I ended up going back to my long poems in this, but I think they're kind of influenced by the shape, the kind of three parts of a sonnet with turns. So here's a long one. And this is a poem. I was trying to write a poem about the Montreal Cognitive Assessment is an assessment for dementia. And so I had the idea of writing a poem about practicing for it. And they were all terrible. And then I realized it's really just like it opens like a Frank O'Hara poem. So I just kind of went with that, his lunch poems. Prepping for the test. It's 8:30 in Fairfield, yes, August 20th, a Saturday morning, and I'm studying for the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. And like a Frank O'Hara poem, I start with where and when I am. The heat wave is finally broken, and I repeat my name aloud, like I'm mentally checking for 10 figures and 10 toes, as if just entering the world rather than delaying my departure. The grass is brown because I forgot to turn on the sprinkler, and I repeat the 5 words: face, velvet, church, red, daffodil. I've avoided early death by dune buggy like O'Hara or renegade jeans like my poor neighbor Andrew, and still hope for a late prime in my mid-60s. Maybe I'd be better off exercising my brain by learning Mandarin or doing puzzles like those nonagenarian nuns in Minnesota. I draw a chair and then draw a line from the 1 to A to 2 to B on the form I've copied off the internet. I never used to study for tests, taking the SAT with a hangover, and even taking my driver's test after one quick read through the book. I know better now. The real tests, Anne's breast cancer, raising children, my mother's slow decline, were all pop quizzes I stumbled through. I read the sentences aloud and repeat them, save the 5 words again: face, velvet, church, red, daisies, and wonder if a story would help. I'm in church, facing an altar with velvet drapes hanging beside the red of Jesus' wounds. The daffodils wave in flower beds out front. Does this test have a Christian bias? Is a dementia diagnosis one more privilege? My head hurts. And I think of the NFL adjusting their tests for concussion money and depressing black players' scores. Is dementia also caused by self-induced collisions with booze and smokes and bad genes and too many hot dogs? Should I study while balancing on one leg to reduce my risk of falling? I name the animals and read the numbers, close my eyes, repeat them aloud. When my friend Eileen was studying to be a school psychologist, I helped her practice giving IQ tests and messed up the numbers going forward by trying to group them, and remembered more going backwards when I just listened, repeating them like a song. 8, 7, 3, 9, 2, like notes, like a bird call. Trying to remember interfered with remembering. I draw a chair, read a list of letters, tap each E, and begin counting backwards from 100 by sevens. 100, 93, 86, wondering if there's a pattern I'm missing, bringing myself back to the task, 79, 72, or are we all just inventing patterns? Shouldn't I want to know if I have dementia? I repeat the words: face, church, velvet, red, daffodils. Did they need to be in order? Do plurals count? Like O'Hara, I'm sweating now. Out the window, the bird feeder looks empty. I probably shouldn't fill it in summer. Is there a point where you just let nature do its work? I tally the points, 30 out of 30, well past the 25 I need to pass. Feeling tired, calm, like after meditating, hungry, wanting to write. Out the window, a cardinal lands on the feeder, finds a last morsel, sings a high shoo, 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 then wit, 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 and flies away. And if I have time, I'd like to read one more short one. It's called, it's called Tough Love. It's one of the last poems in the book. Tough love. As you can see, I'm dying, the professor said to open our first class. His face, worn to gray skin and bone, left no doubt. Ridged brows shadowed his dark eyes. For 14 weeks, you will learn about group therapy by doing, he said. He stared down questions. The stillness demanded secrets. After 30 minutes, the shaggy-haired guy said, I'm having an affair with a patient. The professor nodded, and the details spilled out. The next week, an hour in, an ex-nun confessed she'd aborted her child. Oh, you must have, I began, but his glare shut me down. She told us everything. Each week, we sat in silence until someone cracked. I'd interrupt, offer them a chance to read, consider. He'd scowl. One night he waited, a grim shadow in the fluorescent hall, and said, stop trying to save everyone. I nodded. They need to speak. After we got into our dark cars, he lit a cigarette. The orange flared on his skeletal face. The next week we learned he was dead. Our talk echoed strangely in the room. We want to finish the class like he taught us, we said, and then sat in the hammer of silence until someone split open. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Jack, what a powerful, powerful bunch of poems, and poignant and like humorous, and all of these fantastic moments, all these vivid, incredible scenes and characters, and these incredible meditations on like on aging. Just really, really incredible poems. Chris, fantastic, right?
Unbelievable. And this book, you're everybody's vaguely familiar, which I love that title, by the way. this idea of the memoir in verse. I mean, people have done that, but I'm always fascinated by that. But I want to talk about that later, because I love that concept. And then the pivot over to the new book to write about other people, right, and people that you've observed.
Yes.
But amazing variety there, and Dick Powers, what an amazing amazing
That's too good.
Dick Powers to me now, but there you go.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Oh, and I loved the breaking of the sonnet. That poem was so powerful and so poignant, and kind of how that like dissipated from the sonnet form. That was just so fantastic and so powerful. Anyways, we'll be excited to ask you more questions during the Q&A.
Well,
yes, thank you so much.
We got to hear from Sandy.
That's right.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So we will see you at 9, Jack. Thank you so much. Excellent. And we need to welcome our second reader of the evening. Very excited to introduce to you Sandy Carlson. Hey, Sandy.
Hi there.
How are you doing this evening?
I am doing great, and it's great to be with you all.
Yes. Oh, what an evening it is already, and we're so excited to get to hear you. Chris, would you do the honors of sharing Sandy's bio?
Yes, indeed. Sandy Carlson, a writer and teacher in Northwestern Connecticut, is poet laureate of Woodbury, where she lived for the past 25 years. Sandy just published her 5th collection of poetry, Bearing Witness to the Wind, a collection that celebrates reimagining life after grief. A member of the Connecticut Poetry Society, Sandy recently formed the Oronog chapter, 4 members in Woodbury, Watertown, Southbury, Roxbury, and Bethlehem. She also works with local seniors to explore poems that matter to them and to engage in group writing that builds a sense of belonging among participants, and I hope we have time to talk about that later. Sandy, who has worked as a freelance writer and editor as well as a reporter, hosts the podcast People and Their Poems, conversations about poems that people care about and then inspire them to write. Sandy's web address, easy to remember, sandycarlson.net. All righty, Sandy, take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. And I'm very happy to read some poems that really celebrate what it means to be family and in a particular place. My poetry really does a lot to explore just that, who we are and where we are in the relationship between the two. And I'm going to read from my first little book called 17 Park Lane, a little poem called Handbag. A granny's handbag handed down to a small girl has secrets set in places to hold summer air and zip in the clean smell of a granny's perfume. She stays in the bag, large as life and calm as sunshine, with daisy chains and dandelion rings on the arm of a child looking smart in plastic sunglasses. And the Easter dress put on special for the granny who bought it. The buttery button clasp is the jewel of the bag's brass crown, demure in a bed of rainbow ice rhinestones. It snaps and shines with every marigold purchase of Sunday dinner sunshine. A granny knows that. She buys a handbag as if it were home. That was for my grandmother, who always had old stuff that was cool to have and play with when I was a kid. And it probably meant more than she knew. My next poem isn't family exactly, not biological family, but this poem is called Mostly Water, and it's from 2000 when a little boy named Elias Gonzalez was fleeing Cuba with his family on a rubber raft, and he fell off the raft, and here's what happened. Mostly water. Their gray bodies curve with the gray waves. Dolphins negotiate water by becoming it, though they draw breath from the blue space between heaven and earth, weaving sky and water into a living fabric, each breath a thread, each stream of bubbles a seam. A Cuban boy dropped through this mesh. Dolphins taught him to breathe, bringing him to the surface of the gray water between Cuba and Miami. He said he was 5 at the time. They kept him alive. Some folks called it magic. Part of being home for me means being near the ocean or Long Island Sound, where my parents had me regularly as a kid growing up on the Norwalk Islands. And we would camp there in the 70s before everything was sort of nature preserve and private property. The 70s was a wild time to be out there. And this poem is called The Sound Was a Sea, and it's about one of the more memorable camping trips. We tended to invite bad weather. So the sound was a sea. Wind tore the boat from its tenuous mooring. It bobbed and drifted on the scrapping sound, transformed into a sea on that storming night. My father pulled the boat back with his bare hands in the tumble-down dark of ageless night. The world began under such conditions. We waited inside the tent. We never thought he might need all our hands, that the sea could jerk him into its loneliness. It was almost morning when he returned, victorious, without a word, and rested. He thought we never stirred. Afraid to speak, we sat beside him and watched the cold sea carve rivers into his sleeping face. My dad was a giant. My family's lived in Connecticut for a long time, and my mother's family, you can't kill us. We live a long time. And as a result, stories pass on intact over time as well. And this little poem I'm going to read from Silent Spaces honors my great uncles who served in the Second World War. And I received stories about my uncle who died as a submariner in the Pacific from his older brother, who was my mentor and like a second grandfather to me as a kid. This is called Silent Service. A third and more of this nation's age, my uncle does not listen for news. He once told me in the story of a brother that there is no news. The herring sank when the Japanese on land nailed the U-boat's conning tower. Only oil bubbled to the top of the silent, sealed water. There is no news, no story. That boy's battle position was in that tower. He wanted to be a submariner, became one, and that's it. Near the coast of Japan, a kid who liked to fish died without a story. A brother tried all his life to find it in other submariners' artifacts, pictures, history books. None my uncle met knew this ship's cook, third class, 60 years ago. Too young to be there, he nevertheless was. Perhaps he survived? He loved a girl. Who's to say how hard it is surviving? A stroke of very bad luck left my uncle his fist to do his talking. His locked mouth keeps stories prisoner. There are none to hear. He keeps them all. There is no news. Love alone remains. I think I feel very fortunate to have grown up where my family has been for a very long time and to have heard stories from older relatives. I think it's one of the richest blessings I can claim. And when I've written with my family in mind. And these local events online and in person, the open mics are a great opportunity and very, very wonderful for creating an opportunity to share and engage meaningfully with an audience. And this is my book for my mom called Always True. And this is a little poem called Mom's Garden. Ghosts of last year's garden drift or flutter in the breeze on a gray April day, filled by a breeze, lifted by a warming sun. Ghosts of leaves of 4 o'clocks, irises, gladiolus, and grasses that call to mind warm and bright blue beaches rather than unforgiving rock jutting through this Pennsylvania hill. Ghosts come away easily in my hand to reveal this year's regeneration. Though it is pale green or white, having been hidden from the light and warm, nevertheless, under a blanket of passing life. So it goes that I have found what has been here all along. This garden does not need me. My touch is an intercession that serves my own need. 4 o'clocks and daffodils have pushed their way to the surface and opened them to spring. Life, as we all know, or have been told, goes on. My mom had a great garden, and when she was dying from cancer, I often weeded for her, and she would, I think, be very pleased to see her garden going on. And after she passed, I brought a lot of her plants to my garden here in Woodbury, and the garden goes on. I teach freshman English, and I do a lot with Greek mythology and the greatest book ever, The Odyssey by Homer. And after Mom passed, I found myself retreating inside the myths for comfort and finding it there. This poem for Mom is called Callisto and Arcas. A found poem in Greek mythology for everyone, Legends of the Gods and Heroes by Donald Richardson. There was no way he could know that at long last he had met his true mother, although she did somehow recognize him. She shrank back in horror as he, avoiding her eyes, raised his spear to strike. At that instant, great Zeus chose to act. He stayed the thrust and in a whirlwind, caught up both mother and son and flung them far, far into the heavens, there to stay as honored constellations. Callisto still shines as the great bear, Arcas as the little bear. Thus did the Lord of Olympus bring glory to the Arcadian beauty he once loved. Once loved or loved once? No matter. Recognition meets a deferred gaze. An arrow finds direction, and then life itself intervenes, because life will find a way. No need to split the baby in half. No need to say I love you. Just look up, see the stars. And on a more earthly note, this is a little biographical one called Candy Bars. Every school day of my childhood, Mom brought home to me a candy bar from Jimmy's Market, where she stopped for milk, cigarettes, and whatever else she might need to make dinner for Dad and us every day. The money for those candy bars came from her tips, working all day waiting tables one town over in the Bethel Friendlies every day. She would put it on the counter, heat some coffee, smoke, and talk about her day. There was the struggling nature photographer, the May-December couple, and the rock he gave her. the artist who illustrated the Velveteen Rabbit, sometimes Graham when she came up for a visit, teachers, truckers, businessmen, bankers, the unemployed, people doing their laundry at the laundromat 3 doors down. Then the mom would make supper, call us to the table, continue the stories, and let us go, saying we could do the dishes on the weekend, which we never had to do. The candy bars, like the hard work day in and day out, said, I love you. The same way the stories and the free passes on chores said, I love you. Did I get it at the time? I don't think so. Where there was love, I saw routine. So the pandemic was a time of tremendous loss for me. I lost my mom and then my dad, and then 2 friends who were like another set of parents. And this is my book for my dad called Slow Passage Home. And this is him, very handsome, my mom, my nephews, and my daughter on North Topsail Beach in North Carolina. And anyway, Caduceus. Your day is all surf and sunshine, salt spray and soft sand. You walk on and feel yourself tan, but then clouds move in and lead into the warm air, a darkening moment, and there is Hermes, whispering in your ear an invitation through your deepest artery to the pain you cannot honor with a name in daylight. You paid for the pain. Now you pay for the ride. You cross into your darkness. The dog barks and nips and tears, but you move on, no Virgil to guide you, no Beatrice to warm your heart, until you are at the center of your heart and there is Hermes playing on his tortoiseshell lyre, an ancient theme for your naked, bleeding truth, and you honor it with your name. And then Hermes tells you, you cannot say, stay, so swim out of this darkness. And in your innocent nakedness, you do. And there is Zeus straight ahead with thunderbolts bearing the name you gave suffering. When you found the courage to face it alone, he gives your sorrow to earth and life-giving energy that pulses with joy. And there it is, a vibrant world that is calling you again to walk like a king in the sunshine. But you can't have Hades without Persephone. So here we go, Persephone. The rolling fog and rain claimed vision and dissolved me into the gray, deafening light of a solitary day. A day without voices, a day without faces. Claimed me as a particle of dust, washed from the sky and returned to earth, deeper, deeper. And there is Persephone in Hades where spirits rest as they wander, and the queen awaits spring to return to earth. In the waiting, there's a breaking apart, a disintegration, a softening to the earth, a surrender. Transformation as the speck of dust becomes a narcissus, rising through thawing earth, pressing life into clean air. Spirits rise. All righty, so show you this little cover that my daughter painted this for me when she was in middle school. It's a little girl playing a clarinet, and the notes are love. Delame Zicko Carlson is a grad student at UNC Greensboro, where she is doing a great job being a great musician. So bearing witness to the wind. We know so little. Like Odysseus in the underworld, or at least in the stories he tells of being there and finding his mother and the heroes of war, I make the blood sacrifice by opening my heart to listen. Ancestors come, dancing, posing, losing patience with me as I compose them into neat memories like angels rising ever upwards on the ever-expanding ceiling of time, framing the night world of dreams. No one speaks, but appears and vanishes. No hero talk to tell, only a pointing toward dawn. Light will come. The mothers will speak. I hear them now in the winds of early May, midwives to spring, more forceful now than ever in life. The winds say, we go on. All right. This song is called "The Sheep Have to Be Fed," and I wrote this early in Putin's war of aggression on Ukraine. And watching the news and listening to people speak, I was amazed by the poetry and the living and in the speaking. And truthfully, I didn't know much about Ukraine at the time, and I'm no expert now for sure, but I know more and have a deep respect for what I've learned. The sheep have to be fed. In the Carpathian Mountains in Western Ukraine, the Hutsul people say they are not going anywhere, period. Putin be damned. The Hutsul people wake every morning, as they have for centuries, to feed the sheep their people have fed with the grasses that grow around them in the Carpathian Mountains, where they have withstood invasions from Poles, Lithuanians, Magyars, and Mongols for centuries. The sheep have to be fed. So you get up, you feed them. When summer comes, you shear them. When autumn comes, you spin their wool into yarn. At winter, you weave the blankets that tell your ancient story, and you sing while you weave. The fibers of the blanket vibrate with your voice. When you wash the blanket in the river's voice adds itself to the story, and the sheep stand in silent witness. That's how it goes. The story is the main thing, along with the fiber of every being. You offer the story from your land on Etsy, and the world wants it. Blanket after blanket, you tell the story from your high ground, weaving diamonds that symbolize the sun, the all-seeing eye of truth, the art of being who you are, of staying put. And that actually is inspired by a story I read on Business Insider. In truth, my mom is never far from my thoughts. That's her needlework behind me. It's all over my house. She was an angel. This poem is for her. The turning. Things stop. There is a day before, a day after, then and now, which change in an instant. This is the moment I wonder about. The tractor in the field, its engine warm yet, and the farmer leaving it there to dissolve into earth over time. Similarly, the pickup at the back of the cornfield. Who decided it need never run again? Things left and forgotten, and this forgetting an act of will. This is what I wonder about. Why? The list goes on. The wheelbarrow left to rot behind the garage, its plywood sides split and swelling with dampness, full yet with weeds you pulled from your flower garden, Mom? In what moment did you decide that was the last time for you? I imagine you felt as solitary then as your bean mocks are now in the soft light on Dad's workbench, clumped yet with the hummus from that last day. Were your lungs tired after a day in the garden? On what would be your last day, fending for the flowers while Dad watched from the bench that stands there empty now, its stain blistered and peeling in the unforgiving sun. Though for a time I cared for your flowers for you as you would watch from your bedroom window, you joked with me and I laughed, though you were dying. You turned from your barrow, I turned toward you. Tractor, truck, sparrows, how it is outside. I come inside now and find your needlework stuffed in a bean tote in your closet, jammed tight between a heating duct and the wall. I pull, and there it is, the eye of a wolf embroidered to life. There is soul in this fabric, yours. But a day came to tell you you would not finish this, and you put it away. You could not throw it out, but you left it to be found. I had to work for it, working hard to free it from that hidden space, unlike the tractor, the truck, the barrow. And the cancer cap, a nylon floral covering with a shirred panel to cover the neck. You stuffed that deep in the drawer of your mother's end table. Cancer would take your life before you would see yourself decked out like a gypsy fortune teller. You put it away when you were alone. You would never be a cancer patient or a survivor. You would fight this and let go on your terms, in your time. And so you did. Outside the windows, a neighborhood kid cuts the grass with your lawnmower. For how much longer? That will stop too. The boy will walk away from it and leave the grass to grow around the rustic chairs and table you placed under the cedar, a cool place from which to admire the garden. It will happen in a precise moment. The clock will cease ticking and memory will lift itself skyward. We will imagine the life that came here to rain down as solitude, to know you have lived, but will not always. The immense design is waiting for you. But you needn't clean up before you go, perhaps mustn't, that we may find you in time, in the turning. Okay, I'll just read one more. I'll read Norwalk Island's memory in honor of Norwalk, which we seem to share. Back to those excursions on Saturdays and Sundays in the 70s. The indigos of mussel, cherry tone, whites of oysters with their indigo coins, greens of full-bladdered and sun-dried seaweed, browns of sand, disintegrated small shells, and the sea swell wearing down of granite. Follow the rack line around the island to a small stream, cross onto the mudflats, respiring with small creatures, step lightly into the tall grasses sharp as razors, climb to a rise cool and beaming with trees, climb under the shade, enter a farmhouse in the clutches of embracing verdure, pulling it down, uprooting all memory. Only names remain to locate this time: Kakini, Ram, now Shay, Shimon's goose, grass, calf pasture, tree hammock, copse, peach, crow, Sheffield, little tavern. Pirates, prohibition, farm life, and booze punctuate the history of these islands. If you find treasure, it's mine, Dad would say. Once grazing lands, these islands, once homesteads, once a vast power plant on Manresa, talk once of a nuclear power plant, ghosts left to be pulled down by time and trees, and in a moment gone. The family left, curtains fluttering through open windows, teacups in the sink, bread knife on the board, and the family went ashore, went shopping, went home to dry land. No cattle, no corn. Somebody's neighbor now, a need to talk. We arrived to picnic in the coarse sand, in ice-cold beer, lemonade, children roaming. We set foot on the island to explore among the rocks. If you find a treasure, it's mine. I set out, hoping for a gift, alone among the rocks, climbing, searching, a sunny day, a picnic, a memory. Sanctuaries now for all marine life. These islands keep you. Come ashore. Come home. Thank you.
Woo, Sandy! Oh my goodness! What a just a gorgeous, gorgeous, poignant, powerful, emotional journey. All of these incredibly vivid family memories, these Connecticut memories, these Norwalk Island. This is the coolest thing. It's the first time I've heard a poem about the Connecticut, the Norwalk Islands. That is just so cool. But overall, I was grabbing my tissue here.
Oh no.
I'm glad I had time to to dry my eyes real quick, but just incredibly, incredibly powerful, poignant, vivid pieces here, Sandy. I just love them. Really, really love them. Chris, I'm gushing.
No, thank you.
Gushing. No, these are so beautiful, and it's just the idea of the way you opened up, you talked about how so many of these were about family and how important that is to you, and that to have these books and dedicated to your parents and so many poems. It's so lovely. It's such a great moment for them. I mean, it's really touching, and you think, well, okay, thank God you're a poet, and you can do this, or some kind of
so incredibly beautifully just incredibly
those feelings, in this kind of way, maybe they do it some other way. I mean, hopefully they're creative and they can do, a sculpture or a painting or a song or something like that. But it's beautiful.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Oh, Sandy, just awesome. And it was just so cool to be a part of these memories, be a part of these images, to get to see them, to get to be on the Norwalk Islands in the 70s too. I have so many questions. It's so cool. I love it. Well, Sandy, thank you so much. It is time for our Q&A. We're going to bring back up Jack Powers. Everybody, get your questions in the chat. Another round of applause for Jack Powers and Sandy Carlson. Woo! Both of you just absolutely incredible. Really, really really powerful readings. Oh, these incredible images of family life, these incredible stories that we got to just be a part of in this last hour, that we got to see and imagine and kind of process with you. Just such a powerful and poignant richness. Thank you both so much. Chris, I'm going to pass it over to you for our infamous first question.
I don't know how infamous it is, but
Famous. It's a big one. It's a big one.
well, it's it's a good opening question. So yeah, we'll start with Jack. So it's a very straightforward question. How has writing changed your life, Jack Powers?
I think it's given me the opportunity to reflect on things that, in a way that maybe others do not, non-writers do not have that opportunity.
Right.
Also, I was I was a painting major in college and high school, basically too, drawing and so when I kind of fell off that, writing has been a way for me to get my creative yayas. And I think it's also just when I'm in the middle of writing something that I'm really like, I'm a much happier person. Makes me happy. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. This opportunity to reflect, but also like this different kind of attentiveness. You have the painting, and that's such a cool urge to have. And I'm sure that there's a very interesting and vivid crossover to your poems as well. And we all can certainly testify to how writing is so satisfying. It does like make you feel better. It does heal you. But...
Well, it goes to what I was saying about Sandy's work about her family and her parents in particular, right? It's like, it gives you that opportunity to reflect on your family, because you have so many family, all those backseat of the car, which I totally related to so much, moments that might not stick in your head, for so firmly if you didn't sit there and write a poem about it. Now, I mean, now it's there. It's there. You're not going to shake that. That's just great.
Absolutely. Sandy, what about you? How has writing changed your life?
Well, it started to the connection to other people through writing. I experienced that when I was in high school. I'm an introvert, and I just love to write. And I went to Danbury High School, and I graduated in '84. It was a big school then, and I'd rather sit down and do some writing than deal with the mob, And I guess I'm all gloom and doom tonight, but my grandmother was dying of cancer, and it was getting close. And I took my green felt tip pen, and I started to write an essay in my journal about my grandmother. And then I thought, wait, and I wrote "Dear Grandma" at the top, and I gave it to my parents to take to the hospital because we had to stick with our schoolwork, and we weren't going down there every day as kids. And they read it to her. And when she came home from the hospital before she passed, she told me it was the most beautiful letter she ever received. And then the minister read part of it at her memorial service. And so that poignant moment, if I just kept it to myself,
right.
The fact that I didn't is what made the difference for me. And it's a little bit like when Instagram was new, everybody's looking at the world through the lens. I think as writers, we kind of do that. It's a more in-depth process, but it's where's the story here? Where's the poem in this moment?
Right.
And it's just a nice way to look at the world.
Absolutely. And that it is so meaningful, like that meant so much to your grandmother. You're like, it was so worth it for me. It was so worth it for her, for my audience, for my community, that this has this beautiful and powerful effect, of what that meaning can do, what that act has done in the world. Just believing in that is a powerful and beautiful thing. That's awesome, Sandy. We love it.
No kidding. I mean, how often do we write stuff and we have that kind of immediate impact on particularly somebody that you love, but really on anybody. It's just like, we write our things. Sometimes they go out in the world, and to have somebody be so moved by it, no wonder you kept on going and writing.
Absolutely, absolutely. We have a question that just came up in the chat. And we have so many of our own questions to ask both of you that have come up that we're excited about. And Ed is echoing one of mine for Sandy, which is, how deep in Connecticut's history is your family rooted, and how many more poems do we have, these like little historic views of Connecticut?
I'm a dyed-in-the-wool nutmegger. You know what? My mother's ancestors came from England in 1637. They were merchant adventurers. They weren't religious fanatics, and they they started out in Salem, and then they came down with the Killingworth to settle out what became Killingworth, and had been out there and found the graveyard where these little bits of sandstone are sinking into the ground, and that's them. Yeah, when that got crowded, they made their way west along the coast through Stratford up into Woodbury. And with the Woodbury settlement's hilarious because they did this deal with the natives, but they weren't sure which hill they bought. So we're not good with directions. It hasn't improved over time. So it goes back pretty deep, And then the Woodbury connection, my great great grandfather was a tobacco farmer here in Woodbury. And then after the Civil War, there wasn't much farming here. So the family kind of made its way down to Stamford and to the coast and worked as carpenters and plumbers and so on. So it's been that kind of Litchfield.
What a journey.
Do this big loop through the two counties, for the most part.
That is very, very fascinating, Sandy. Oh, wow. That is so cool. And so you said you went to Danbury High School. So you grew up, I guess, in Danbury?
Yeah, for the most part. I started life in Bethel, then the big shift to Danbury, and it was like, those towns were small, So yeah, and then got married in Danbury, and then we migrated back to Woodbury before our daughter was born, just to kind of, because we could afford the place at the time. But it was just a happy accident,
Affordability has been challenging for a while in Connecticut.
Yep. We got in at a good time.
That's so great. That's so great. And now you are the Woodbury Poet Laureate, which is kind of a pretty awesome thing. It
feels good. I'm trying to represent my town well, and I feel it's a nice honor.
That is just fantastic. That is so fantastic. Jack, you through your poems, we are seeing all of these family scenes, and something that I haven't seen as often, which are these super vivid family car scenes. Jack, can you tell us more about writing about your family, writing more about growing up, and how it came to you to write these super vivid childhood scenes?
I am. Some of it is, I started out writing, I was teaching kids to write. And so I started taking classes, learning how to teach kids. And they said to write with the kids. And so we would just write our stories. And the kids would write their stories, and I would write my stories. They're mostly more like personal essays.
Right.
So they kind of moved into fiction for a while. And then when my kids were a certain age, I just couldn't hold a novel in my head, but I could hold a poem in my head. So I did poetry. But they're kind of, even now, I'll think of a story. There's some other stories in there of some of crazier antics. And I would always tell that story as a funny story, but now it's not, I've tried to reuse them and see what else I might dig out of the story.
I like that.
And I think there's also a certain amount, there's a recreation of these memories. My brother claims the car ride. It's probably a composite of car rides, but he said, no, never happened.
What again? Say again?
He says, no, it never happened. And I wrote a piece about my grandmother once, and my older sister, 5 years older, read it and said, you had a different grandmother than I did.
Whoa!
I did. I meant to make a note in one of the counting poem, Whitney Houston. my wife insists that she was just passing by. She might have seen a highlight of it. She wasn't watching the funeral live. So, I've created something that, maybe never happened, but
I
Right.
think that's so
makes for a good story.
interesting.
These are poems. This is not a New York Times, article, from the news. This is your truth.
Yep.
Right.
And I'm curious. You kind of introduced the book as I thought I wrote it down, but I didn't. Oh well, yeah, memoir in verse, right? I mean, and did you set out? Did you say, okay, I'm going to write my memoir in verse, or did you look one day and say, I have a whole bunch
This
of
is a memoir in verse of this collection. Yeah.
my life, so now I'm going to put them together and create this. Like, which came first?
I think it's as much an observation of other people's first books. I think a lot of first books are a memoir in verse. You write about, that's the material that you're working with.
Right.
And often you see, the second book or third book turns into, I don't know if you're familiar with Nick Flynn, wrote some phenomenal poems about his mother and father, and father was homeless. It was they're phenomenal poems. And then he wrote a book about bees.
I love
that,
it.
first you have, the material of your life is what you have to work with. So I think that's I think that's an observation about other people's first books also, but particularly mine. And I tried to shift, but I think I couldn't quite make it to bees. So I have a friend who insists the bee book is all really about his mother. So I didn't get that far.
Oh, I think it's so interesting.
You just get more and more metaphorical, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, perhaps. I think that it's so interesting what you just said about memory too, Jack. How these other people were like, that didn't happen, or I don't remember it that way. But that speaks so powerfully to the fact that the way you remember it was powerful enough for you to kind of express it in that way. I think that in itself is something pretty fascinating, something pretty wonderful. One very cool similarity between both of you this evening is that we have these incredibly vivid kind of family scenes and odes, and it was just such a richness of these memories and meditations, throughout our reading hour there. Sandy, I would love to ask you, and then maybe we could pass this question over to Jack, perhaps. How does the inspiration for these particular like family-based poems hit you? Do you just have a knowing when something happens, or do you have a regular like writing practice where you sit down to write and that's just what you need to write? How do they come to you, Sandy?
Oh, great question. I'll give you an example. The Norfolk Island's memory. My family and I had gone out to Sheffield Island for, with the ferry boat out south the seaport there. And we were passing all those islands where we camped and we picnicked and sunbathed and swam and did all these cool things, fishing, and just had wonderful, wonderful times. And I think it just kind of ferments. And I find I keep a journal and I'll just draft something and leave it there and go back to it, and form will suggest itself possibly, and just that kind of back and forth. And I think it, like I said, looking through your camera phone at the world, and it's the writer's lens. It's just become kind of a habit. And you just get these kind of trigger points. You record it, and then like this abundance will end up coming for it either immediately or at some other point. I know. Yeah. And I'm surrounded by things that my mother made, and my grandmother, my great grandmother made. I mean,
right.
My house looks like a set for a Tennessee Williams plays. We're very much 1940s here.
I mean, just even looking at your little background there, I'm like, I want to ask questions about each one of these items. They all seem to have a history.
So all these mnemonics, so I think that's probably a good part of it too.
Totally. Absolutely, absolutely love it. That is so great. That is so great. And you know, I guess Jack, to pass it over to you a bit. We were kind of talking a bit about inspiration and how you remember these moments. But do you have a regular kind of writing practice? Do you write as the spirit moves? What is that typically like for you?
Well, I want to say I was noticing when Sandy was reading, you know, her take on family, and he writes with such kindness and loving sincerity. I thought it's really good the wise guy went first, because it would have been bad.
We love both tones. We love it all. We love it all, and we can hear the sincerity even in the wise guy stuff. I love that the holy shitball poem was precious, and I think it's capturing such this great little family moment, this childhood moment. You know, I love that as well, and that's great too.
But as far as a practice, for years, I taught for 38 years in Reading at Joel Barlow, and I wrote with my students all the time. So some, you know, it was just regularly writing with them. I wrote a lot of crap, and every so often something that worked. A lot of times it's inspired by other poems. But since I retired, until recently, I was getting up every morning, say around 7, and then writing for 2 or 3 hours. Just, again, a lot of stuff that was terrible. Every so often something would click, or a memory would surface, or frequently I'll read another poem and go, oh, that reminds me of this, and then I start and then I think it's going to go here, and then that doesn't work, and then I go back to where, you know, it's sort of like when you're driving somewhere and you get lost, and you say, well, I'm going to go back to the point where I wasn't lost, and then I'll try a new direction. So it's mostly just a regular practice of writing now. Though I used to, when my kids were younger and I was teaching, I really relied on my writing with my students in class.
You got to keep the pen moving, right?
Mm-hmm. And I've been a member of a writing group through the Connecticut Writing Project for 30 years. And that meant I had a deadline once a month. I had to come up with something. So that forced me to finish.
Very helpful.
And then I'm in a second writing group now, and that helps too. Actually, with Laurel Peterson and Van Hartman, who were previous guests.
Right. Yes, and who sent you to us, and we're so thankful.
Right. Yeah, I'm thankful as well. But that, having the time and the, you know, deadline and the response of a writing group keeps me going.
That is so wonderful, and that's really great.
Yeah, you mentioned before we went on that you've recently finished a novel. So how does that fit into this world of, you know, you're writing poems, and then you write it? You know, how long did it take you? How different was it from the process of? Obviously, it can be very different, but for you, how did that work?
Well, I was writing fiction and novels before I was writing poetry. And it was really just, as I said earlier, my kids got to a certain age. I was very busy at work. I didn't have time to do that. So I started writing poetry because that's what I had time for in my life, and I enjoy it. And once I retired, I wanted to get back to it. Great. So during the pandemic, a lot of people felt very isolated, but I had a bunch of imaginary friends I was with every morning for 3 or 4 hours. And I really think it was, I was healthier, went through that, had a much easier time than most people had.
Yeah.
It's just that it's, you know, a novel. I was probably at it for 2 years. I don't know if it's done. I sent it off to agents, haven't heard anything. It may go through another revision. There's nothing like sending something off to immediately start to have a perspective of what else you probably should have done with it.
Yep.
After that once I did send it off, I really had a flurry of writing poems again. And I'm loving writing poems because you can write a poem and finish it.
That's
great.
That's great. It's
so cool.
How did the pandemic work for you in terms of your writing? Was it like that? And we've heard this a lot from writers on this on the live stream here, that it was an opportunity and people were, they took advantage.
A little bit of a retreat, a little bit of a silver lining for writing time.
Yeah. The time I wasn't in the car driving to school and driving back, and then as a school teacher, we were online.
Yeah.
Didn't have to do anything during the lunch break. So there were multiple opportunities to just kind of go for a walk and let the ideas find you, I think it's the idea of the muses do find you once you open your mind to the possibilities. But writing was my sourdough bread, it really was during the pandemic. So yeah.
The novel is my sourdough bread, I think.
Yes. I love that we have these like quarantine metaphors and sayings now. It's perfect because we all know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
We didn't knock out any walls here. We just kind of kept playing with the technology and with the pens,
Oh my God, yes. Oh, that's so great. That's so great. I think I was part of the trying new makeup, and I'm still like riding that wave. I didn't have nearly as many colors on my face before the pandemic, but here we are.
I also thought that as much as people hate Zoom, I was taking a class called Year of the Book at the Hudson Valley Writers Center, and basically it was write a poem every week. Come in with a new poem. At the end, in theory, you'd have 52, poems. And taught by this woman, Jennifer Franklin. And once we went on Zoom, I wasn't doing that hour drive there and hour drive back because we knew each other, it worked really, really well. Once we learned, how to share the fact that only one person could talk at a time. But I thought I was very productive as a result. But that helped to actually be able to get out of my own head in my own little room and see other people. And my writing groups met on Zoom as well. So I felt like I kind of had the best of both.
That's wonderful. I mean, listen, that is just so fantastic. We've experienced that firsthand as well. Not only did being online and remote help us to connect with our own community in their different places when we couldn't safely gather in person, but it's enabled us to connect with our community who is in California. It's enabled us to meet new people, almost just about, I think everyone who we saw yesterday at the New York City Poetry Festival was someone we met through online poetry venues who we then invited, to read here. And it was a real special thing in terms of accessibility, and also just like taking away the commute time, the stress of the commute, and even just the stress of like in-person presentations sometimes, to like focus more on the writing, focus more on the connections, focus more on the other aspects. And that's definitely been a silver lining. We do have a question in the chat though, Chris. Let's pop this up here. This is another one from Ed Zitko. He said, unless you're Stephen King or Sue Grafton, I love those names, those authors, and many other fiction writers, don't we all write what we know to some degree or about what interests us? I think so. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that came out of the discussion of what Jack was talking about, first books being about family and growing up.
That makes sense. Yes.
And then, possibly moving on to bees, if you know about bees.
Bees. Jack, that was great. That was great. If either one of you want to share anything more from here, to some degree about what interests us, yes.
Well, yeah, I think that's been everything I've written. I mean, I've worked as a reporter and I've been told to go cover the hospital beat. I don't want to do that,
Right.
to go in there. And I think that's sort of the beauty of it, is that freedom of choice. And I guess another question comes up: how do you get out of your box? How do you find a new form or a new topic or a new critical lens? So I think, and for me, it's like trying to read something I don't like. I do the BARD program in the spring and the fall, the Institute for Writing and Thinking, and I always choose one that I'm not interested in. I skip over everything I love, and I think I'm going to read that science fiction.
Yes.
And it's over there for me to start reading, but so I think that becomes the question, if you're not Stephen King or Sue Grafton, you have this tremendous latitude, right? Nobody's expecting this from you.
That's
so
right.
What do you want it to be? But then the question becomes, how do I go beyond what I do?
Yep.
What's the next thing, And that's where I think writers groups and events like this, where we can experience other people's work and styles and forms, becomes really, really valuable.
That is so true, Sandy, and I think that also resonates with something that Jack said before when he's reading other authors or poets. How you're not only enjoying what you're reading, but you're getting inspired. Oh, I want to try that, or oh, what about this? This is something I would not have thought of if I was just sitting here writing on my own, not necessarily engaging with other writers at this moment. That is so cool. I like that. I'm a firm believer in trying something different and being inspired by that, as well as kind of just doing what you do and liking what you like and exploring what you're typically driven to explore. But I think we need to get to our famous last double question. Passing it over to Chris.
Not infamous, but famous now.
Well, yeah, a little bit infamous. It's another challenging one.
Jack, then I go over to Sandy. It is a double question. First question is, we're just asking for a pearl of wisdom for the folks out there who are writers. Maybe something they need to hear, and you need to tell them about writing. Something you've learned. Just a bit of advice, and then part two of this is a book recommendation. Not necessarily a book, about writing, although that can be good too, but any book. So Jack, pearl of wisdom and a book recommendation.
All right. Well, pearl of wisdom, I'm going to try to wrap two in here. One of them is that you need to be writing when the muse shows. You happen to have the pen moving. So I think waiting for inspiration is a big mistake. You'll always be waiting. So make your writing, a regular writing practice. And also, I took a class from Diana Getch, and she has a new spin on free writing, which I did years ago, and at Bard's Institute of Writing and Thinking, went there in the 80s, I think. But she really pushes it to, one, give yourself permission to write a lot of crap, but also when you get bored, just shift directions and actually train your brain to shift directions.
Yeah.
Throw in prompts of, on the other hand, or, shifts, almost like building a volta into your free writing to get yourself to something new. So she would say, if when I finish, I've merely executed a plan, I've failed. So what you need to do is write towards surprise. I think that's the best pieces I've written. I get to the end and I'm as surprised as, like the first reader. I'm surprised, like, wow, how did I get there?
I like that. Great pearls.
Was that too? And then a book recommendation. I was going to answer the last question about do we just write what we know, what we're familiar with?
Yes, go for it.
I'm fascinated with books that are really different than the other books people have written, that are about something totally different. And I'm like, how did they do that? And I don't, maybe someday I'll write a How Did I Do That one. So one of them would be Bel Canto by Ann Patchett.
Yes.
Another would be Euphoria by Lily King. And I just read this book that's set in Chechnya, and the two wars of it being destroyed was written by some 25-year-old American kid from Washington, D.C. through research and imagination. It's a phenomenal book, and it has great insight into what's going on in Ukraine. Right? The Russian military style of destroy, destroy, destroy. But it's a beautiful story about these three people, and totally different. I don't know how he ever imagined this world. It's amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And what's the title of that one?
I can't remember. It's something like a collection of vital phenomena or something like that.
Oh.
Mara. You know what? I'll look it up.
Yeah.
all Sandy's.
Anthony Mara, maybe.
Yes, that's it.
I have not read that book, but that's one of those like stuck in my head. Like I got to read that one.
He just came out with a new book, and in the
Yeah.
review they mentioned the old one, and I went and read the old one.
Yes.
I haven't read the new one yet. I'd like to.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, I love the conversation we've had this evening about about, of course, we're writing what we're interested in, what we're drawn to, but also like putting ourselves in these situations where we're reading something totally different and being inspired by something totally different. I think that's just as important. And I love what both of you have said on that. That's fantastic. To pass over our double question to Sandy, a pearl of wisdom and a recommendation. Oh, wait, did you get to your recommendation yet? You didn't share your recommendation yet, Jack. I'm so sorry. Sandy. Hold on.
I just did.
I gave 3 of them.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought that was part of what you were saying. Okay.
No.
Trying to
We're
seamlessly
together.
put them together.
I got it now. I'm so sorry. I'm like so literal sometimes. Like, apologies. Fantastic. Love it. Sandy, proceed.
Okay. All right. Well, you know what? I'll start with the book thing, the book recommendation. And it's a book from the early 70s, Robert Bly's Leaping Poetry.
Okay.
And he does he highlights some poems, Spanish language poets, Scandinavian poets, the sort of, now that we're speaking of not the usuals, right? And invites you to look at them in a way that goes from how the writer goes from the conscious mind to the unconscious mind, unconsciously, and how that imbues a poem with magic and beauty and power. And it's a short book with a great little anthology that illustrates his point. And he's so delightfully curmudgeonly about some writers that were contemporary in the 70s that it's kind of fun.
That's great.
And I read the book, and then I'm looking up to see if the people he referred to were dead when he wrote it. Or did they get their feelings hurt? I don't know. Why I would worry about that 40 years later, I don't know, but I did. That would be my book recommendation. And I would give the advice that I give all my students, which is use a pen, throw the pencil away, honor your thoughts, don't let them be rubbed off the page. And if you discard an idea, just draw a line through it so you can go back to it. It mattered for a reason at the time.
I love it.
Keep it. So that's my advice.
I love it. Yes, there's that pen. And I got only pens right here, which are my current. A rainbow of pens to help inspire me. Well, that's
there you go.
Thank you so much, Jack Powers, Sandy Carlson. One more round of applause. You are both just absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for sharing all of the incredible poetry you shared this evening. Thank you so much to our fantastic audience for joining us. We really such lovely poems, and we can pick up your books on your websites, Amazon, etc.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yep.
And thank you very much for inviting us. This was a lot of fun.
Of course, and thank you, Jack, for the book plug. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for the shout out.
Good. It's funny, but only in the service of fine literature.
That is so great. Well, and we know that you're both pretty local, so maybe I can come out on a Friday night to our in-person.
Yeah, I'd love to.
We'd love that. Yeah,
we'd love to have you. We'd love to have you feature as well. That'd be incredible. Thank you so much for your readings. Thanks to our audience. And next week we are off because we have our in-person event. So come find us at Eco Evolution. We'll be back online 2 weeks from tonight.
That's right. Friday night, Eco Evolution, South Norwalk. Check it out.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
All right.
Yes.
Next, Sandy.
Thank you. Have